We are following some breaking stories that have been really changing quite quickly in the last 24 hours, but we've got the latest twists and turns for you. We're going to start with new developments in separate Justice Department investigations. First, another classified document was discovered in former Vice President Mike Pence's Indiana home after a 5-hour search. It is the latest drop in a steady stream of classified discoveries that have spanned multiple administrations. Although it seems to me that only one person there has committed a crime, and it's not Mike Pence, leading some to wonder if new legislation might actually be necessary. Secondly, then there's Special Counsel Jack Smith. He issued a subpoena to Mike Pence in the investigation of former President Trump's role in January 6th. A source familiar with the Trump legal team's discussions tells NBC News it's a subpoena that the former president's attorneys are planning to fight. Donald Trump's legal team declined to comment. And on the national security front, a U.S. fighter jet shot down another high-altitude object, this time in airspace over the skies of Alaska. This just comes days after pilots also shot down a Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina. The Pentagon has given few details about this most recent object and its origins, but here's what the National Security Council's Strategic Communications Coordinator, John Kirby, had to say on Friday.
I can confirm that the Department of Defense was tracking a high-altitude object over Alaska airspace in the last 24 hours. The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. Out of an abundance of caution and at the recommendation of the Pentagon, President Biden ordered the military to down the object.
Joining me now to discuss all this and more is the Democratic congressman from South Carolina and assistant Democratic leader, Jim Clyburn. Welcome to you, sir. Let's start with the object. What information, if any, have you or other members gotten about this high-altitude object? Have you put in a request for more information?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I have not gotten any information. I think that I've been looking on your program and others. You all tend to seem to have more sources than we Congress people have. And so I have not heard anything that other than that which I've heard from the media. I do believe that Hakeem Jeffries, our leader, is staying abreast. At least that's what I'm told. And I suspect that he'll let us know what we need to know when he thinks we need to know it.
All right. Let's move to the latest in the Pence documents case. And I would like to start by playing some of what Democratic Congressman Jim Himes told my colleagues on Morning Joe about whether Congress needs to pass legislation addressing document handling by the administration. Take a listen.
You know, no, I don't think we need legislation. I don't think we need a blue ribbon commission on how to keep classified information in the White House. Again, I think we need a 30-year-old with a top secret SCI security clearance to look at a bunch of boxes.
Do you agree?
I think so. I don't know that we need additional information. You know, I've been to classified briefings. I don't go to many of them. And when they say to us, you look at this and you leave it at your seats, you do that. Now, I think it's been a little bit disconcerting that a lot of people with access to this information seem to be a little bit negligent in how they deal with it. And so I just think that that's what we need to do. Just be focused on what you're doing. I don't think we need more laws to deal with it.
So, Congressman, there are folks, particularly in the case of former Vice President Mike Pence and President Biden, these documents seem to have made their way into their possession because they were packing up at the end of an administration. So you don't think there's any legislation that Congress should pass to create some type of rule there?
Well, I don't think you need legislation for someone to be able to recognize the word classified. And if it's a file that's classified, you don't put it in boxes to go to anybody's home. It goes to archives or it goes to whatever the appropriate agency might be. I can understand how a folder gets wrapped into something else, gets misplaced or something. I don't think you need any legislation for that. No matter what you do with legislation, people have to be vigilant. People have to pay attention, and they have to follow the rules. You can't make people not break the law, no matter what law you make. It's not there to prevent people. It's there to hopefully discourage them. People still find a way, and sometimes unintentionally break the laws.
I want to turn to talk about Social Security and Medicare, Congressman. Republicans balked, if you will, earlier this week when President Biden said at his State of the Union that they had proposed cuts to programs such as Social Security and Medicare. Senator Rick Scott, he infamously proposed sunsetting all federal legislation, including Medicare and Social Security, within 5 years under a Republican Senate. Now the senator has announced this so-called Protect Our Seniors Act, which he claims will protect Social Security and Medicare. It would also require a 2/3 vote to make cuts to the programs I just referenced. Do you buy this backtracking?
No, I don't. I know the whole history of Social Security. I've studied Social Security all the way back to the 1935 legislation. I know that Social Security has been a problem for Republicans since its inception. I also know what the final vote was, and they'll keep telling you that there was a bipartisan vote. But look at the debate that went up to the vote that created Social Security in the first place. They always hated the program. I do know that Newt Gingrich hated Medicare. I do know that Rick Scott wrote in his proposal as the chair of the Republicans' Senatorial Campaign Committee, he laid out that he wanted to sunset it every 5 years, and if it's worthwhile, Congress can renew it. That should not be. And he's not the only one. Senator Lee, I've seen the video of him saying he wants to get rid of it. So we must take them at their word. And you know what Maya Angelou says? You got to believe them the first time. So what they're saying now makes no difference to me. I believe what they said the first time.
Believe them the first time. Congressman Jim Clyburn, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, let's go to the legal piece here. And I want to talk about the most significant action yet by the special counsel who was appointed to look into former President Trump's role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and also the former president's mishandling of classified documents. Jack Smith has subpoenaed former Vice President Mike Pence to see what evidence he has of Trump's involvement with the insurrection. And today, we are hearing the former president's legal team will be weighing in. I want to bring in MSNBC legal analyst Paul Butler. He joins me now. He's a professor at Georgetown School of Law and a former federal prosecutor. All right, Paul, make it plain for the people. Should we be gleaning anything from this subpoena, or is Jack Smith just, doing his job?
Both. This is what prosecutors do when they are seriously considering indicting somebody, Simone. It's a really big deal to haul the former vice president into a grand jury that's conducting a criminal investigation. Jack Smith is an experienced public corruption prosecutor. He would only do this. There's an extremely compelling reason. What I think is going on, prosecutors want to lock in Mike Pence's testimony in the case that charges are brought against Donald Trump. And Jack Smith also wants to know what went down in those one-on-one conversations between Trump and Pence. The January 6th committee heard from Pence's top aides, but of course, Pence refused to cooperate with that committee.
So along those lines, Paul, we are now hearing that former President Trump's attorneys are going to fight this subpoena, and they're going to do so on the grounds of executive privilege. But can you just set the record straight for us? Can Pence or the former president claim executive privilege in this instance, understanding that many Trump administration officials have tried to do so, and the Biden White House has declined to extend that privilege to them?
They can certainly go to a court and assert their privilege, but it's not going to happen. Legally, it's a straightforward case. Pence will eventually have to comply with this subpoena. Trump might claim executive privilege. That's a weak claim. In a case called U.S. versus Nixon, the Supreme Court said it doesn't carry the same weight in criminal investigations as in congressional hearings. Also, the privilege, as you said, mainly belongs to the sitting president. That's President Biden. Trump can claim some residual privilege, but courts aren't real sympathetic to that. And finally, Simone, Pence wrote about January 6th in his book. You don't get to say stuff to sell books and then claim you can't talk about it to the grand jury because it's privileged.
And he also did multiple interviews. Okay, thank you for making that clear. So then, Paul, there's also earlier reporting that said that the former vice president's team, Mike Pence, was weighing a response to the subpoena. But what is there to weigh? Because I didn't know that you could ignore a subpoena from the Justice Department.
Ain't nothing to weigh, Simone. People remember how some Trump sympathizers dissed the January 6th commission by refusing to comply with those subpoenas. This is a whole different game. It's a grand jury subpoena with a strong enforcement mechanism. If you don't obey it, federal agents can lock you up until you do.
All right. Well, Paul Butler, I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much, sir.
Always a pleasure, my friend.